Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. It's billed as the largest private real estate development in our nation's history, the city's next Rockefeller Center. And tonight, we're taking you to Hudson Yards for a closer look at the first phase of this sprawling development on the city's far west side. As the founder and chairman of related companies, Stephen Ross is the man behind it all. The billionaire many times over is among the richest and most powerful developers in the city, with a portfolio that includes the Time Warner Center in Columbus Circle and now Hudson Yards, a project already criticized as a playground for the rich. In an article titled "The Only Man Who Could Build Oz," New York Magazine recently chronicled Ross's fascinating rise as a super developer, as well as his relentless campaign to transform Hudson Yards from rail yard to spectacular reality. And joining us now to talk about all that is the author of the piece, New York Magazine editor-at-large, Carl Swanson. Carl, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Carl, first of all, now, you spoke to Stephen Ross in the course of writing the article. Of course, you also took a tour of Hudson Yard before its official opening. What struck you during this behind-the-scenes look that you found particularly surprising or particularly interesting?
You know, the first time I met him actually was a couple of years ago when it was announced they were going to build what they call the vessel right now. I don't know what they're going to call it, but this enormous structure of just staircases that they put sort of in the middle of it as a kind of
stairways to nowhere.
Yeah. And he would say, and I was curious about it because it seemed like an odd thing to do, but in some ways it tells you the story of the entire development, which is you are going to build an enormous, expensive office, retail, and residential development in a place where no one really lives, a place no one even really think of going to, well, not only because there were trains there, but also because it was just kind of unpleasant.
Yeah, for most New Yorkers, New York on the west side ends like at 9th Avenue before.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe 8th. Yeah. And so he came in there and he said, okay, what's going to bring people to this? What's going to make people talk about this? We're going to spend $200 million within the budget of this thing to build what he called, a Rockefeller Center Christmas tree 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. And so it shows you what that taught me and what I've been thinking, and the reason I was excited about doing this follow-up story close to the opening of it, was that he's a guy who figures out he's not just building a building, he's building an idea. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we're talking about it now, it's not just that it's one of the biggest real estate developments in the world, and certainly the biggest in the country right now, but because it just does something that is so beyond what most people would even think was possible. Yeah.
But it's an idea, it's something that many critics, including one of your colleagues at New York Magazine, kind of characterize as a fortress city-state within the city for rich people, willfully separating itself from New York's hoi polloi, from the commoners. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that, to some extent, they do actually completely cop to that. They call it a city within a city. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to Steve Ross, he lives right now in a kind of smaller, you call it almost a test run for this, which is Columbus Circle. Yeah. And that's the Time Warner Center, which it was one of the first large-scale, multi-use buildings in the country. Apparently, it's pretty common to do this in Asia and in other parts of the world. But here, that was the first time that anyone's really done it. And he lives there. And he eats there, and his offices are there, and he works out there at the Equinox. They also own Equinox. Mm-hmm. If he wants to, I don't know if he shops at Whole Foods, but if he does, he could. And so the idea is that have, as he put it to me, everything at your fingertips. You don't have to leave if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what he's building there. A bigger version of that. Mm-hmm. And one could argue, and I think that as someone, I live in the East Village, right? So I live in a walk-up building. Mm-hmm. I have to go downstairs to get anything. Yeah. I like that. I like that sort of idea of, I guess it's sort of Jane Jacobs' idea of the mix of people, right. But that's not everyone's idea of what New York City is. Yeah. And I don't think that's necessarily with the idea that it's certainly not what Steve Ross's idea of New York City is. Right. And I don't think you could argue that it was exactly what the Bloomberg administration was trying to do.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, right. So, you describe Ross as possibly the most powerful man in New York today, and you call him, quote, a Robert Moses for our age of concierge mega-urbanism. First of all, what is concierge mega-urbanism, and why is he so powerful?
Well, he's very powerful, I think, because he actually, for one thing, because he can get things done. And he's willing to do things a lot of other developers aren't willing to do. One of the sort of subtexts that a lot of people haven't really been paid attention to with Hudson Yards is that they've had a very aggressive stance towards the unions. And the unions are very powerful in the city, but they're willing to go up against the unions. And that's a lot of developers won't deal with that. A lot of developers won't deal with sort of like the various things, the various agendas of the city. He's very close to Dan Doctoroff. Dan Doctoroff was the
former,
deputy mayor of
economic development. Yeah.
And really,
Under Bloomberg, yeah.
Under Bloomberg, and really this was and he's known him since they were both part owners of the Islanders in the 1990s. And they're both from Michigan. He's a Michigan guy, loves Michigan guys. Yeah. And this idea that this train yard and this area could be this series of big glass towers for first-class corporations and wealthy people and some affordable housing tucked in there too, is very much a Bloomberg idea. It's very much a Dan Doctoroff idea. And Dan will tell me, and he said this to many people, only Steve Ross could get this done. Only Steve Ross and related could get this done.
As you write in your article, Hudson Yards is getting $5.6 billion of taxpayer money.
Yes.
And as you just said, sometimes Stephen Ross mixes it up with the unions. He's not that friendly to the unions. How come there wasn't the hue and cry about the Hudson Yards as there was about Amazon?
Well, I think it's two reasons. One is it's the kind of subsidies they got. And that's because a lot of that money went to the extension of the 7 train. And it's hard for anyone really to object to the idea of more subways. The second thing is, I think it was just a different era. Yeah. I mean, it really was. It was the height of the Bloomberg era when this happened, and people were just not as critical of these things. I mean, there's always been criticism of subsidies, especially with things like stadiums and things like that in the city. But economic development subsidies, people have not been as critical of.
I get it. So listen, we only have about 30 seconds left. 15 years from now, 20 years from now, are New Yorkers going to see Hudson Yards as this fortress for rich people that's turning its back on us? Or are New Yorkers going to see it with indifference or maybe with a little bit of pride? What's your best guess?
It's funny. I was doing some research about Rockefeller Center, and everyone loves Rockefeller Center right now. If you look at when Rockefeller Center was first built, it was criticized by a lot of people for being too opulent, sort of this monument to wealth, to the Rockefellers. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying this is as good a piece of urbanism as that, because if you walk in Rockefeller Center at this point, you kind of can't believe the scale of it, how beautifully it's put together, and how it's but it is true that people do get used to things, and
to the Eiffel Tower.
Completely. I mean, you think of the old World Trade Center was not exactly the most beloved thing when it opened, but it's interesting. I mean, you do sort of get used to it, and it becomes part of
So you think we'll get to love it?
I think. Yes, I think you'll just sort of see it as being a part of the city, and even if it does embody something that really isn't for you, but you'll just sort of, I think, accept it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Carl. Thanks so much.
Sure.